Yo, I just did a video on a meteor over El Popo, and you know, I saw that they're doing the Artemis mission, so why don't we look at that?
Sound suppressor water now flowing
15.
under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis-I. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis-I. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in Mission Control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis-I. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter.
Well,
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis-I, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members, we just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange. We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis-I. So far, we've had a clean ascent We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis-I, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good. Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour.
I don't know if I need to say this. This is not a real image.
Again, 4 good core stage
Of
engines,
the active,
those 4 RS-25 engines.
of the live.
The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight.
Of the live rockets. This is just a 3D animation.
5 minutes, 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center.
I mean, it's real. It's just not the rocket that we're.
Core stage main engine cut off at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis-I, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire at maximum thrust. Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston. As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down. "30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down. Now 7 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff. And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we just watched Artemis-I launch, our first step towards our next adventure into deep space. As Leah said, I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. And I'm kind of still giddy and speechless. I don't even know how to explain how I'm feeling right now.
I feel the same way. This is the first launch that I've been able to watch in person. And I've got to say, it was incredible. It took my breath away, and I was tearing up just what an amazing accomplishment for this team, this international team, people who have been dedicating their careers to getting this rocket off the ground and taking the first step to getting a crew on that vehicle back to the moon. It was just incredible.
Yeah, this is a moment I think that we're all going to remember where we were when we saw this sort of thing, you know what I mean? And it was great to see, again, when we entered into terminal count, everybody here just started cheering, you know, coming out to get a really good view. And boy, I mean, it lit up the night sky and it just shook everything around us. Did you feel that? Like in my bones, I felt that.
Oh yeah, the cool thing is just kind of the delay between what you see and
Yes.
what you hear, because of course the sound travels a little bit slower, and it was just amazing. The ground shook. We could hear the thrust pushing that rocket into space. 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
Yes.
It's incredible. It
Yeah.
was amazing to see here live in person.
How does it compare? So this is your first launch on the ground. How does it compare to your launch when you're in the capsule soaring towards space?
I mean, equally emotional, I think.
Yeah.
We train for everything, and so when we're in that capsule waiting for launch, we're just running our procedures. You could almost, you know, trick us and say that we were in the simulator and it wasn't real, but like in that moment of liftoff, when the thrust builds underneath you, like we saw it today, it's just hard not to be overwhelmed by the emotional experience, the excitement, the joy of that moment. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think we can't say it enough. This team really deserved this moment. They've been working so hard for this moment. When I heard that we got into terminal count, it was, I felt a sense of relief and excitement for them that I think everybody here did. You know, we really wanted them to succeed. We really wanted to see the launch today. And wow, I will never forget this.
Me neither. It was an incredible experience to be here and see that happen.
Yeah, was there anything that was particularly surprising to you? Again, this is your first launch, you know, what were you expecting?
You know, I think we also had a nighttime launch for our launch, and so I think one thing you underestimate is how much it lights up the night sky.
Yes.
We were able to watch it all the way through that trajectory. We were able to see the boosters separate and everything. So it was just an incredible view. It's amazing how much you get to see of the flight path when it's at night and it's lighting up the sky.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but we see the moon here, and the trajectory of the rocket looked like it was flying towards me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, that's so poetic. It's so beautiful. I'm so glad we launched today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Congratulations
absolutely.
to the team. It's
So
incredible.
we're going to head over to Daryl, who was at the launch team. Daryl, you got to count us down through that, through liftoff. I mean, how was that being in the launch control center with them?
Well, Megan, it was something else. I got to tell you, you're looking live inside the firing room where Charlie Blackwell Thompson is about to address her team after a whole lot of hard work and preparation to get to this moment. Let's stand by and listen to her now.
Comm check. But you can't hear it in the room. Can you guys hear me? No. Hey, Jeremy, can you see if you could turn something on there to the microphone? The press site can hear me, but the room can't. The room can't. You can hear me? Because the guys... I don't know what he's telling me to do.
I just want to make a comment. After watching SpaceX, maybe on one of the Falcon 9 launches, this looks like much more of a setup, like a permanent setup. Whereas I remember thinking that the SpaceX setup looked like a LAN gaming center or something, like a LAN BYOC, like bring your own computer event. And this looks a lot more like a permanent. I mean, because it is, but not just a room with a bunch of high-end PCs in it.
Is here?
Can you guys hear me?
I don't mean that.
There we go.
I don't mean that as a slight against SpaceX. I just.
Is he ready for me? Well, for once, I might be speechless. So you guys know I have talked a lot about appreciating the moment that you're in. And we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment. It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You have earned this moment. You have earned your place in history. You were part of a first. Doesn't come along very often. Once in a career, maybe. But we are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars. What you have done today will inspire generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for your resilience. You know, I said at the pre-test briefing, the harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations. So we got a couple of traditions here in launch control. And the first one is when you're in the position for the first time, you get a tie cutting. And so I have my launch director scissors. And I'm going to get my tie cut by a couple of legends that are here. And then anyone who wants their tie cut will be making the rounds in the firing room. You got your console chiefs, if they want to do it, that's fine. If you want me to do it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all night if I have to. It'll be my pleasure to cut ties. So I'm going to take care of mine, and then I have one other presentation that I want to make this evening.
This is Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, Artemis-I launch director. She just got her tie cut. That is a tradition here at NASA. We just got to hear her talk to the team, and one thing that really stuck out to me that she said is that they really earned their place in history. We're coming up on solar array deploy. Let's go on to Leah.
Thanks, Megan. And yes, we're here in Mission Control Houston, still monitoring the Artemis-I mission and the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we've just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning our focus to that. The spacecraft was running on battery power, but stretching these wings will allow it to stop relying on those batteries and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit and all the way back to Earth. Once these are properly configured, again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about 30 minutes after liftoff. Right now, we're 19 minutes since liftoff today. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour. We're continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston from the flight controllers monitoring the mission. A little bit about these solar arrays as we wait. Again, we heard the call that the deploy has been initiated. We'll hear a little bit more about that once they start to unfold. These 4 solar arrays generate 11 kilowatts of power, which is enough electricity to power 2 3-bedroom houses, and they have a wingspan of 63 feet. Just one of these 6.5 by 6.5 foot panels has 1,250 solar cells. So you're looking at a total of 15,000 solar cells. Now, we just heard the call that all 4 solar arrays have been released. So we initially heard the initiation call. That command had been sent. Now those 4 solar arrays are released. Again, this is about a 12-minute process. These solar arrays will deploy straight, and you're getting a live view right now. This is really exciting. They'll eventually be swept back against the vehicle prior to translunar injection burn to prevent any loads from breaking or damaging the arrays. And on the end of each solar array is a camera that will capture imagery for us throughout the mission, along with a few other cameras placed outside and inside the spacecraft to help us monitor and perform various other inspections.
Okay, now put a 4K camera on the on the
Of course, if
space
you
station,
recall the
please. Thank
Apollo
you.
capsule design,
And
there
then
were
make
no
the feed
solar
public.
arrays. We had fuel
Thank you.
cells
Thank
instead.
you.
So this design with
Thank you.
arrays gives us the opportunity to stay in orbit longer, since we practically have no limit to the energy available for use from the sun.
Actually, if you could put a 16K camera, but you could stream it in
Coming up
4K,
on
that'd be
21
great.
minutes since liftoff. Orion is attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. You can see those 4 solar arrays unfolding now. And again, Artemis-I is a flight test. It's paving the way for a sustainable presence at the moon. Looking forward to the future, Gateway will be our space station in lunar orbit. And we have some similarities and differences in the solar arrays unfolding right now on Orion and those that'll be on Gateway. So like we're seeing now, these are deploying autonomously. The Gateway solar arrays will as well.
Obviously, this is not a
And while these
real-time
generate those
view,
11
but
kilowatts of power, the 2 rollout solar
that
arrays, or
is.
ROSAs, on Gateway will generate 60 kilowatts of power. That
That
ROSA
is too.
design is currently being tested aboard the space station. We have 2 new ones installed and a spacewalk conducted earlier today, preparing for another set. Coming up on 22 minutes since liftoff today, Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage traveling over 16,800 miles per hour. The solar arrays deploying now are part of the European Service Module. It's comprised of 20,000 parts and components. The service module was developed as part of an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, or ESA. This is the first time NASA is using a European-built system as a critical element to power an American spacecraft. Coming up now, and 24 minutes into the flight of Artemis-I, spacecraft now traveling at 16,500 miles per hour around the Earth. We are in solar array deploy, and we have confirmation all 4 arrays are deployed. Coming up in a little less than 30 minutes is the perigee raise maneuver. And with our launch at 1:41 Eastern Time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 seconds into the flight, and we have a complete deployment of all 4 solar arrays. Orion's journey to the moon continues as planned. Again, looking forward to that perigee raise maneuver. That'll be coming up again at about 53 minutes into the mission, so about 27 minutes from now. During the perigee raise maneuver, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will use its RL-10 engine to lift the lowest point of Orion in Earth's orbit. The current orbit is more of an oval shape than a perfect circle, and this burn will raise that point closest to Earth and make the orbit more circular. This will also include a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays. It'll be a short burn, less than 30 seconds long, but critical to keep us on track, and it also prepares us for the next engine burn to send Orion to the moon. That's the translunar injection burn. That'll come up a little later, which is a longer burn, another firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. We caught a glimpse there of those solar arrays, and with all 4 solar arrays properly deployed, Orion's journey to the moon continues, and we've got more operational updates coming up shortly, but for now, I'm going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla at Kennedy.
Leah, thank you so much. Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and learn how to live and work there. With more on our destination, let's bring back NASA's Dan Hewitt with our new moon board.
Hey, thanks, Megan. I gotta be honest, we ran outside to catch it. I'm still shaking a little bit. That never gets old. That is always one of the coolest things you'll ever see in your entire life. And that rocket was massive and loud and just so cool. All right, the moon. This is why we call it the moon board, but the moon, you know, since the dawn of time, humans have looked at the sky and shouted at our neighbor, "I'm gonna walk in your face." And in the 60s, we actually did it. 6 times, starting with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11, 1969, followed by 5 more successive landings, each time delivering 2 human beings to the surface of the moon. Our last one was Apollo 17, and that was in 1972, Gene Cernan and Harrison Smith stepping off for the last time. Now, we have not sent humans back since then, but they accomplished a lot under Apollo. Lots of technological advancements, deployed science instruments, brought back hundreds of pounds of lunar rocks and regolith, teaching us about the moon and also about our place in the solar system. The moon is fascinating because it doesn't have a lot of the geological processes we have here on Earth. You don't have erosion, you don't have wind and water wearing down rocks, you don't have plate tectonics that are constantly recycling the crust. And so everything out there is really old. In fact, one of the rocks brought back on Apollo 15, called the Genesis rock, was dated to be 4 billion years old. So from the primordial beginnings of our solar system. But as Kayla said a little bit earlier, those missions were measured in days, their spacewalks in just hours. With Artemis, we're looking to go and we're looking to stay. And we're not looking around the equator like under Apollo, we're looking at the lunar South Pole. Now, why? So we haven't sent people since the 70s to the moon, but we haven't stopped studying it. We've had orbiters like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has literally just been flying loops around the moon, taking high-resolution images of the surface, so high resolution that you can look them up. They have images of all the different Apollo landing sites, and you can actually see the footprints, the paths they left in the lunar regolith of those sites. We had a mission called L-Cross, which slammed a probe into a crater on the moon, sending out material, some of which potentially hadn't seen direct sunlight for billions of years, and then analyzing what shot out. And through missions like that and others, we've been able to find that there is water ice trapped in those permanently shadowed areas on the moon. A lot of them center around that South Pole. We have already identified 13 potential landing sites for the Artemis-I mission. And these are where we're going to send our astronauts around the lunar South Pole to access that water ice. Now, why water? Why are we caring about water? Well, it serves a lot of purposes. Obviously, for humans, you need that to breathe. You can split water apart, get oxygen for breathing gas for an atmosphere. If you have a lunar base, you can split it into oxygen and hydrogen. That's rocket fuel. We just launched the most powerful rocket in history using those constituent parts. And so you can start to live off the land. We can use that, something called in situ resource utilization. And really, the whole point of that is to use the moon as this proving ground. We're trying to get to Mars. We're trying to learn to live on other planets where there is gravity, where we're going to have to use resources there on the ground because we won't be able to bring everything with us. And by going to the lunar South Pole, by going to stay under Artemis, we're going to be able to start practicing that. We're going to perfect those systems, perfect those techniques and operations we need to do that so we can use the moon as that jumping off point to Mars and beyond. So that's why the moon. We're going to see Orion fly around it for the very first time in just a couple of days. That launch was spectacular. I'm still way too excited, but can't wait to see some shots of the moon from up close from Orion. So I'll send it back over to you, Megan.
Thanks so much, Dan. So right now we're actually joined by members of the Red Crew. You'll remember from watching the launch coverage that the Red Crew was sent out by the launch team when the launch team identified a small leak on a hydrogen valve inside of the mobile launcher. Well, now here they are. This is Trent Annis. Trent, can you just introduce everybody else here on your team?
Yeah, so this is Chad. He's our safety guy. And behind me is Billy. And he's the experienced hydrogen tech out here.
And the three of you guys really, I would say, saved the day today. I mean, really, you guys had to go in there to what's called the blast danger zone. You guys are specially trained to be able to do operations on the pad while cryo is loading. Talk to us about getting that call, being told, hey, you guys need to go in there. And it was the first time for all three of you.
Yeah, all I could say is we were very excited. I was ready to get up there and go.
Really? How are you guys feeling?
I was very comfortable, very confident in the test team and the procedures and our training. We did a great job.
Walk us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So how gratifying it must be for you guys, because you train for this eventuality, but don't always get to do it. Billy was saying that he's been a Red Crew team member for 37 years, and this is the first time he's been called to go into the blast danger zone. So I know for us, when we're training for all of these eventualities, whether it's a spacewalk or robotics operations, you really want to put that training into practice. How do you guys feel like it went today?
Amazing. I still can't believe it. It's surreal to me. It's just insane.
Yeah, kind of walk us through what you were thinking. So you get there and what, is it just like game time and you're really focused, or, you know, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'd say we were very focused on what was happening up there, just making sure we knew what was happening. Because the rocket's, you know, it's alive, it's creaking, it's making venting noises, it's pretty scary. So on zero deck, my heart was pumping. My nerves were going, but yeah, we showed up today. I think as soon as we walked up those stairs, we were ready to rock and roll.
And they were telling us a bit about it while you were working on it. You guys were actually just torquing down the valve to prevent or reduce the leak rate or stop the leak. Is that right?
That's right. Just the packing gland. It was a little loose, so went up there and tightened her up.
You're probably still like in this, oh my gosh moment, like all of us are. You know, has it actually hit you, like the role you played today in making Artemis-I launch?
You know, I still can't believe it. Like, it's, like I said, it's surreal and just amazing. I don't know about you guys, but
They're nodding along behind you, for sure. Anything you want to say to the launch team? Again, this is a big day for the launch team, for you guys, NASA, but really the whole world. I mean, this is a historic launch that I think we'll all remember. Really.
you know, we had a lot of people here helping us out, a lot of teams, firing room. I'm sure that was hectic. And, you know, NASA, Boeing, all the other companies did a great job, and we're glad to be part of it.
One thing I always like to say is spaceflight is a team sport, and I think you guys perfectly demonstrated that today, right? Like, none of us could accomplish this on our own. It takes a really complex team. Nobody can be an expert in all of the systems, all the technology, all of the workarounds we might have to do to get a rocket off the pad. So thank you for the role you played in that team today. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you coming by to talk with us. All right, it's now been about 35 minutes since liftoff of Artemis-I. Orion and ICPS are now free flying, so let's head back to Leah again to talk about how the journey is going so far.
Thanks, Megan. And it has been a pretty smooth ride so far. And we are now, again, like you mentioned, coming up on 36 minutes since launch. That puts us about 17 minutes into the until the perigee raise maneuver. That's going to be the maneuver that lifts the lowest point of Orion's orbit around the Earth and puts us where we need to be ahead of the translunar injection burn. The translunar injection burn is that really long burn that we're going to need to send us on to the moon. So we've been treated to some exciting views from the spacecraft today, including, and we hope to see some from inside the cabin, but we expect to continue receiving photo updates throughout the mission. It takes a team, though, to bring the imagery of Orion down to Earth, so let's meet them.
The imagery that we're collecting on Artemis-I and the mission itself is preparing to carry humans to the moon. The Orion Imager team is going to be monitoring every aspect of visual spacecraft performance for the entire duration of the mission. The first time that we're going to be live streaming digital video from a spacecraft back down to the Earth from the vicinity of the moon. That's never been done before. What we'll be transmitting live streaming will be lower resolution, more compressed, because we have to fit it into a thinner pipe, if you will. Every one of these cameras is in its position where it is and it's configured the way it is for a very specific reason. We're going to be monitoring anything that we can see with the cameras for spacecraft performance. The imagery teams at NASA are composed of dozens and dozens of very highly trained, very specialized people, engineers, technicians, analysts. If we can see it, we're going to try and keep an eye on it. Imagery has been invaluable throughout the history of NASA. We flew cameras on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all of that stuff that we saw with the astronauts around the moon. It helps us detect the unknown unknowns. It allows us to see things that we didn't anticipate happening before. So when we do fly people on Artemis-II, we can have a high confidence that everything is working the way it should.
I don't disagree. Now let's get a 4K webcam up into space. Thank you. Or not webcam, but you know, camera that's on the web.
At those teams that we don't normally see, like the red team that Megan and Kayla just got to interview. A really big thanks to them and everyone that made this liftoff happen tonight. So we are going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla now at KSC. Again, we're about 15 minutes away from perigee raise maneuver.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, we wanted to take us back into Orion and talk about some of the science that's being enabled by Artemis-I today. So inside of Orion are 10 of these. So they're called CubeSats because they're tiny satellites. Essentially, they're the size of the shoebox when they're folded down. But then once they're deployed, they're opened up. They have solar arrays, things like that. That's when it gets a lot bigger. Now, these are called secondary payloads for this mission. Kayla, can you talk to us about what secondary payloads are?
Yeah, it just really means that it's not a primary objective of the mission. We're not relying on the success of these CubeSats for overall mission success. It's kind of a bonus payload, right? A chance to deploy these satellites that have different sensors on them and collect some awesome data to support other research objectives.
Yeah, and I know battery life was a concern for some of them, but all 10 were deployed, and scientists, I'm sure, are eager to see what kind of information that hopefully they'll be able to get. And they're just some of several research projects on this flight that will help gather data about the moon and more.
Artemis-I is paving the way for us to explore deeper and deeper into space.
I think Artemis-I is significant on so many levels. It is a new frontier to do science.
So the primary objective is to test the Orion spacecraft integrated with the Space Launch System.
And it is designed to carry out the boldest of the bold missions.
But it's more than just learning how to travel in space. We're taking a lot of cool science along with us on this first mission to the moon.
So as NASA plans to go back to the surface of the moon and then onto Mars,
we want to spend more time there, and that's riskier business. So the more we learn about the moon itself and the environment where we'll be operating, the better we can prepare. We have 10 CubeSats we call secondary payloads, which are small scientific spacecraft of their own that will each be conducting their own scientific mission.
All of these payloads in some form or fashion will help us going forward. They are going to be studying the moon.
And they're going to help us understand what is the moon made out of, what types of rocks, what types of regolith, what types of ice, what's mixed in with water that might be present.
One of them actually is going to attempt to land on the moon. They're going to be studying the sun.
Understanding and studying the space environment or the space weather.
Some different propulsion systems. These novel ideas will ultimately turn into the technology and the systems that we want to use going forward.
There's a lot of cool things going on between all these CubeSats that make up our secondary payloads. Additionally, inside the Orion, we'll be flying an experiment to study space biology.
Space biology is where we study the underlying changes that Earth-based biological systems undergo when they're in space.
Or basically, how does life respond to the space environment?
The level of ionizing radiation that you experience when you go beyond the Van Allen belt, so you go beyond the protective magnetic sphere that we have around us, you then get exposed to higher levels of ionizing radiation. So we are flying several space biology experiments.
We will take a series of materials,
plant seeds, fungi, the yeast cell, algae,
and ride along the trip. And then when it comes home, we can analyze how they responded to that environment.
This research will help us thrive in space. It will help us to go further and stay there longer.
In addition to space biology, we'll be learning about how to make astronauts more effective in the Orion in the future. An example of that is something called the Callisto Technology Demonstration.
Lockheed Martin built the Orion spacecraft for NASA, and we'll be flying a secondary payload that's a demonstration payload called Callisto. So we took the technology from Amazon for Alexa and the WebEx technology from Cisco, and so we built a digital assistant, if you will, a custom space-qualified Alexa.
Alexa, how does the life support system work?
Orion's life support system is the environmental control and life support system oracles.
And so this payload is a demonstration.
Is it a female version of Hal?
Astronauts in the future could use this technology as an innovative
2001: A Space Odyssey.
So there you have it. I hope you agree with me. This is exciting.
I am just over the moon excited for the Artemis-I.
I see what you did there.
Science we'll conduct on Artemis-I lays the groundwork to ensure that we can safely conduct scientific activities at the moon with our astronauts going forward. This really is the stepping stone for us as we take that next giant leap in space exploration.
So a lot of great science also happening on the International Space Station. I got to speak with astronauts Jessica Watkins and Samantha Cristoforetti while they were still on board about the research there that will benefit future Artemis missions. Jessica, Samantha, your primary job on the space station is to maintain the orbiting lab and conduct science experiments, more than 200 before Crew 4 returns home. Jessica, can you tell me about one of the experiments that will help return us to the moon with the Artemis program?
We do a lot of experiments where we are looking into developing new technologies that will enable us to go further into the solar system. And one of those technologies was the AstroRad experiment. Radiation is one of the challenges that we face when we think about going further into the solar system. And so this vest is an option for providing the crew member with protection. And then one of the mannequins on Artemis-I, launching here later this month, will also be wearing the vest. We'll get a sense for its effectiveness on board as well.
Samantha, I know that you've been doing a lot of work to test how we would grow crops in space. What crops are you growing on Space Station right now, and what's unique about them?
Indeed. Actually, right next to us as we are talking to you, we have a little space station vegetable garden. It's called X-Root, and in a few weeks it will be full of fully grown, hopefully tomatoes and carrot plants. I don't have much of a green thumb, I must confess, but when I harvested those plants and I could really like breathe in all that smell, even if there is no soil, it still has that smell that you would associate on the ground with walking, through a vegetable garden after a rainy day, when there is that moisture in the air, and that was just so pleasant after, such a long time living away from any kind of natural environment. It was very, very pleasant for me.
If it makes you feel any
Based
better,
on the
I also
hair,
do not have a green thumb.
I would assume
so
Sinsu
what about
beans.
water? How are you testing critical life support systems
That's what they're
like
growing.
water to hopefully help us stay off Earth longer than we ever have before?
Sure, yes.
That's a Dragon Ball Z joke.
We kind of
Dragon
use
Ball.
the tagline that yesterday's coffee becomes today's coffee. So there's a process by which we can filter our urine, and so we are at the point now where we are able to recycle about 96% of the essentially of our water on board, and are continuing to test new technologies to get even closer to the 98% utilization rate that we'll need for the moon in particular.
Samantha, what are you most excited about for Artemis-I?
Seeing that gigantic rocket take off, and I think it will be just a sign of all those great things to come.
Jessica, you could one day walk on the moon as part of the Artemis program. How does that make you feel?
The idea of being able to explore the surface of another planetary body, especially for me as a geologist and a planetary geologist specifically, is just super exciting. All of the science that we're going to be able to conduct from the surface of the moon.
Jessica, Samantha, thank you so much. And before you go, I'd love to see a flip.
Hair stays in place the whole time.
I love it. And a double backflip at that. Now, Kayla, you, of course, lived and worked on the International Space Station as part of Crew 3. Do you enjoy, or did you enjoy doing all those science experiments while you were there? It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's incredible to be a part of every single experiment. It's an honor to play a small role in it. We got to do some really cool tech demonstrations while we were up there too. So for me as an engineer, that was really fun. That's a photo of me doing the first scanning electron microscope samples on the International Space Station. And it was cool for me because I worked with a scanning electron microscope in my graduate school research that took up it was as big as this desk.
Oh.
But seeing a miniaturized version of those that we have up there, and imagining how we could use it in a lunar or Martian laboratory to better analyze samples and decide what to bring home was really exciting.
Yeah, and you touched on this earlier before, but I do think it's just so important to note again that you're doing science for scientists who've been working on their studies for decades, some of them. So to fulfill that, how does that make you feel?
It's incredible. We're almost like their laboratory technicians for that little moment in time, but they've been working their entire life, sometimes decades, years, to get that science payload up there. And it's a really unique laboratory environment. The microgravity environment, the space environment, the radiation environment, like you heard talked about in those videos, provides an opportunity to do science that we just can't do here on Earth.
Yeah, and to think that what we do on the International Space Station can fuel future Artemis missions, I think the fact that they go hand in hand is really cool. All right, so let's take some more social media questions. Social media is buzzing right now since we launched about 48 minutes ago. So why don't we take the first question, I think again from let's see, Kayla, how do you feel after launch?
Super inspired. I mean, we talked about it earlier with the Red Crew and in the moments just after launch, but this is really the culmination of a giant team effort. It takes every single member of our team to pull off a successful launch. It's incredibly complicated, incredibly challenging, and in some cases kind of dangerous for a Red Crew team who went inside the blast danger area to make a fix that was critical to today's launch. And so to see the team succeed and feel that excitement was incredible.
I really still have Charlie Blackwell Thompson's words ringing in my head. The fact that she said the harder the climb, the better the view.
Absolutely.
100% correct.
Okay, I'm gonna end it here, kind of. Actually, I have like one more thing maybe I'll show, and it's on a semi-related note. Let's see. Hold on. Okay, so this is an NFT that I recently got. So this is by Space Yacht. I figured the iconography was appropriate for this video. So might be funny. Let's watch real quick. In fact, I'm gonna. Hopefully this isn't too loud. Let's see. All right. I love that the skeleton in there is even looking at a screen that says "to the moon." I just thought it was perfect. Obviously, it's talking about you know, like symbolically to the moon. It's an NFT. It's like a crypto NFT Web3 phrase that's very common. I mean, it's common obviously elsewhere too, but uh yeah, I just thought that'd be funny. So other than that, I thought that was really interesting. Especially at the beginning, just watching it shoot off into space was it's awe-inspiring. Just very impressive what people have done. And obviously, what's crazy is this in you know, however many years we'll look, just like when we look back at kind of impressive feats that have been done in the past, other than you see that it hadn't been done before, that is impressive. But one day, the hope is we'll have such advanced technology that um, it'll render this kind of like silly looking, right? But for now, it's incredible. And yeah, just happy to have been able to watch that. Caught it right before it actually launched, so that was cool. Really glad the feed was in 4K. Uh, Hope they can get more 4K cameras up. Just like, I always comment about uh, wanting the cameras here. In fact, let's go to this real fast. Like, you know, these cameras and stuff, I'd love these to be in 4K. Just, we got a 4K camera at Times Square here, 4K cameras of Tokyo and of Seoul. So it'd be cool if we could get a 4K camera on the high definition live streaming here. I think it's in 720, which I'm not even sure if 720 is technically considered high definition anymore, but when this originally went up, it would have, I suppose, fallen into that category. But let's get some more high quality cameras up on the space station and in space. And if you put them on satellites that are just going around, I mean, I think SpaceX has, for Elon Musk, if you happen to see this, or, whomever at NASA, get some cameras up in space. Like it will. I personally think that people will watch those if you put it up on like the official NASA. Like this was a NASA live broadcast from the NASA channel on YouTube that has 10.8 million subscribers. Here we can even. That's what's going on now. And so if we can get that up, that would be great. Just I think it would increase interest in space and maybe the next generation of engineers and astronauts and who you need to get even further to Mars. Maybe they might be wowed and kind of like inspired by seeing Earth from that perspective, right? So I guess they're gonna rewatch it here, maybe.
And hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis-I. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis-I. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
Okay, I just wanted to see the actual liftoff again. So, yeah, more 4K cameras everywhere, but particularly in space. That would be awesome. And yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. Hopefully, the mission goes well. Maybe, how about a Yahweh mission? Probably be more impressive. You might actually get some kind of supernatural boost. Some kind of spiritual entity that actually exists, or one that actually has power, not some kind of lower entity. But whatever. Just going off the cuff here. Anyway, okay. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you have a blessed one. Congrats to the people at NASA that have worked on this, and yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. So I'm thinking about actually posting up the video of El Popocatépetl that I recorded just a few minutes before this, where a meteor had streaked by, and so have maybe 2 space-related videos up on the channel tonight. So other than that, hope you enjoyed it. Have a blessed one. Like, comment, subscribe, and that's gonna be it. So later. Yeah.